England, 1818. Some women are forgotten long before they are buried. The chandeliers of Worthington House cast their amber glow across the polished marble floor, illuminating a sea of silk gowns in pastel hues and evening coats cut to perfection. The air thrummed with Mozart, punctuated by the rustle of fans and the murmur of 300 voices engaged in the intricate dance of London society during the height of the season. Yet in the shadowed alcove near the refreshment table, Lady Amelia Fairmont stood alone, a silent observer in a modest gown of deep rose that had seen 3 seasons already. At 34, Amelia had long since accepted her position as the forgotten daughter of the late Viscount Fairmont. The years had not been unkind to her features. Her chestnut hair still held rich copper undertones when candlelight caught it, and her green eyes remained clear and intelligent. But society cared little for intelligence in a woman past her prime, and even less for one whose father had died leaving nothing but debts and disappointment. "Have you noticed Lady Amelia Fairmont lurking in the corner?" came a voice from behind Amelia's position, deliberately pitched to Carrie. Lady Pembroke, a woman whose own beauty had faded decades ago but whose malice remained sharp, addressed her companion with theatrical discretion. One would think, after all these years, she might spare herself the humiliation of attending. "Indeed," replied Mrs. Hartford, her tone dripping false sympathy. "Though I suppose she has nowhere else to go now that her father has passed. Poor thing must be desperate for any scrap of society she can grasp." Amelia's fingers tightened imperceptibly around her fan, but her expression remained serene. She had perfected this mask over countless seasons, this appearance of dignified indifference to the cruelties whispered just loud enough to wound. Straightening her spine, she smoothed the rose silk of her gown and pretended to study the dancers whirling past with detached interest. Across the ballroom, her younger sister Sophie glided by on the arm of Lord Pemberton, her husband of 2 years. Sophie's blonde hair was arranged in the latest fashion, her ivory gown adorned with expensive lace and pearls. When their eyes met, Sophie's gaze slid away as though Amelia were merely another piece of furniture, unremarkable and best ignored. The cut was deliberate, precise, and Amelia felt it as keenly as any blade. "Your Grace." The announcement rang out from the entrance, and the ballroom fell into a sudden hush. Even the orchestra seemed to falter for a breath. "Nicholas Davenport, Duke of Ravenswood." Amelia watched as the crowd parted instinctively, creating a pathway for the man who had just entered. Nicholas Davenport stood framed in the doorway, tall and imposing in immaculate evening attire that emphasized his broad shoulders and commanding presence. His dark hair was styled simply, revealing a face of strong aristocratic planes and eyes the color of a winter sky just before storm. At 36, he was considered the most eligible bachelor in England, his title ancient, his fortune vast, and his standards impossibly high. "The Duke appears even more unapproachable than usual this evening," murmured Lady Pembroke to her circle, though she positioned herself strategically along his probable path. "I wonder which unfortunate debutante will be sacrificed to his cold civility tonight." "My niece Margaret was presented to him last week," offered Mrs. Hartford. He barely spoke 3 words before moving on. The girl wept for an hour. Amelia observed the Duke's progress through the ballroom with quiet interest. He moved with the ease of one accustomed to deference, acknowledging greetings with brief nods, but engaging with no one. There was something distant in his manner, as though an invisible barrier separated him from the eager faces surrounding him. Every eligible young lady in attendance attempted to catch his eye, while their mothers maneuvered with desperate subtlety to place their daughters in his path. The spectacle grew tiresome quickly. Amelia had witnessed similar performances for years, the endless parade of hopeful debutantes and calculating mamas, all convinced they would be the one to capture the attention of whichever wealthy lord was currently in want of a wife. It never changed, only the names and faces varied from season to season. Finding the atmosphere suddenly stifling, Amelia slipped through a side door onto the terrace, grateful for the cool spring air against her heated cheeks. The stone balustrade was damp with evening dew, and she rested her gloved hands upon it, breathing deeply of the night-blooming jasmine that climbed the walls. Fleeing the wolves, or simply seeking better company? The voice came from the shadows to her left, deep and masculine, tinged with dry amusement. Amelia turned to find the Duke of Ravenswood himself standing partially concealed by a marble column, a glass of brandy in his hand. His expression held none of the cold civility he had displayed inside, replaced instead by what appeared to be genuine weariness. "Your Grace," she curtsied, startled. "Forgive me, I did not realize anyone else was here. I shall return inside." "Stay," he said simply, the word neither command nor request, but something in between. "Unless you find my company objectionable." "Not at all, Your Grace. I merely thought you might prefer solitude." "Solitude is precisely what I was enjoying until 3 dowager duchesses cornered me near the punch bowl," he replied, his mouth quirking slightly. "Your arrival is infinitely preferable." Amelia found herself unexpectedly intrigued. The Duke's reputation preceded him, all ice and aristocratic hauteur, yet here on the terrace his manners seemed almost human. "I apologize for disturbing your sanctuary, then, though I confess surprised that you require one at all. Most gentlemen of your standing appear to thrive on such gatherings. Most gentlemen of my standing are better actors than I." Nicholas moved into the moonlight, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. "You are Lady Amelia Fairmont, are you not? Daughter of the late Viscount Fairmont. I am surprised your Grace knows my name." "I make it my business to know the players on any stage I am forced to occupy," he replied, "though you seem more observer than participant." "An astute observation, Your Grace." "Tell me, Lady Amelia, what do you observe from your vantage point in the alcove?" The question was asked with such genuine curiosity that Amelia found herself answering honestly, abandoning the platitudes that usually served her well. "I observe desperation masquerading as romance, calculation dressed as charm, and mothers who would sacrifice their daughters to the highest bidder without a moment's hesitation." Instead of taking offense, Nicholas laughed, a genuine sound of surprised pleasure. "Brutally honest, how refreshing. Forgive me, Your Grace. I should not have spoken so plainly. On the contrary, you should speak plainly more often. London society would benefit immensely from occasional honesty." He moved closer, his expression thoughtful. "And what of you, Lady Amelia? Are you not also participating in this marketplace of marriage?" "I ceased being merchandise many years ago, Your Grace. My value depreciated beyond recovery." "Value." He repeated the word as though tasting something bitter. What an unfortunate way to measure a person's worth. Their eyes met, and for a moment something passed between them, an understanding born of mutual disillusionment with the world they inhabited. Then Nicholas inclined his head, a gesture of respect rather than dismissal. "Thank you for the conversation, Lady Amelia. It has been the most genuine exchange I have experienced all season." With that, he returned inside, leaving Amelia alone on the terrace with the jasmine and the stars. She remained there for several moments, her heart beating with an unfamiliar rhythm, wondering why a simple conversation with the Duke had left her feeling more alive than she had in years. When she finally returned to the ballroom, she felt the weight of curious stares following her movements. Lady Pembroke's eyes were narrowed with speculation, and even Sophie glanced her way with something that might have been concern or calculation. But Amelia barely noticed. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the forgotten spinster had been truly seen. The morning following the Worthington ball dawned cold and gray, matching Amelia's mood as she sat in the cramped study of her late father's townhouse. The room smelled of damp and old leather, a testament to years of neglect and mounting debts. Before her, on the worn mahogany desk, lay a stack of notices, each more threatening than the last. "Lady Amelia." The voice of her housekeeper, Mrs. Bellwood, trembled from the doorway. "There are 2 gentlemen here to see you. They say they represent Hargrove and Sons. Creditors?" Again. Amelia straightened her spine and nodded. "Show them in, Mrs. Bellwood." The men who entered wore expressions of professional sympathy that barely concealed their impatience. The elder, a portly gentleman with graying whiskers, introduced himself as Mr. Hargrove himself. "Lady Amelia, I regret this visit is necessary," he began, settling uninvited into the chair across from her. "However, your father's outstanding debts have reached a critical juncture. Without immediate settlement, we shall be forced to petition the courts for seizure of this property and its contents." "How long do I have?" Amelia asked, her voice steady despite the cold dread settling in her stomach. 3 weeks, my lady. Perhaps 4, if we can convince the other parties to extend their patience. Mr. Hargrove's expression suggested this was unlikely. I am sorry. Your father was a gentleman of many admirable qualities, but financial prudence was not among them. After they departed, Amelia remained motionless at the desk, staring at the notices without seeing them. 3 weeks to find nearly £2,000, an impossible sum. The jewelry had been sold months ago. The paintings, the silver, anything of value had already been quietly auctioned to pay previous debts. All that remained was the house itself, and even that was mortgaged beyond its worth. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Bellwood appeared again, her weathered face brightening slightly. Lady Amelia, Miss Hayes has called. Shall I show her to the drawing room? Yes, please. Amelia rose, grateful for the distraction of her oldest friend's company. Charlotte Hayes swept into the drawing room moments later, her practical gray traveling dress and sensible bonnet a stark contrast to the faded elegance of the room. At 38, Charlotte had long ago made peace with her unmarried status, finding purpose instead in managing her brother's household and various charitable endeavors. Amelia, my dear, Charlotte crossed to embrace her friend, studying her face with concern. You look exhausted. What has happened? Amelia explained the morning's visit, watching Charlotte's expression shift from concern to anger. 3 weeks. The vultures. And your sister, surely Sophie would help if she knew the severity. I sent word to Sophie yesterday, Amelia replied quietly. She called this morning before you arrived, and she was nervous, evasive. She claimed Lord Pemberton would not approve of involving himself in my father's debts. She left within 10 minutes. Amelia moved to the window, gazing out at the narrow street below. There was something strange in her manner, Charlotte, almost fearful. But she refused to explain further. Charlotte's mouth thinned with disapproval. Your sister married well enough. The least she could do is offer assistance to her own blood. Perhaps Lord Pemberton truly has forbidden it. Amelia shrugged, though the gesture felt hollow. It matters little now. I have no resources, no prospects, and no time. You have friends, Charlotte said firmly. Though I confess my own situation offers little practical help. My brother's generosity extends to housing me, but he controls the purse strings entirely. She paused, then added with uncharacteristic hesitancy. There is always the possibility of seeking a position. A governess, perhaps, or companion to a wealthy widow. At 34, with no references beyond my own noble name, which is now synonymous with poverty. Amelia laughed without humor. I am too old to be a governess and too proud to be a companion. Then what will you do? Before Amelia could respond, Mrs. Bellwood appeared yet again, this time carrying a silver salver bearing a single cream envelope, sealed with dark blue wax. This just arrived by special messenger, my lady. Amelia took the envelope with trembling fingers, recognizing immediately the ducal crest pressed into the wax. Her heart began to race as she broke the seal and unfolded the heavy paper within. What is it? Charlotte demanded, watching her friend's face pale. The Duke of Ravenswood requests the honor of my company for tea tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. Amelia read the elegant script again, certain she had misunderstood. He wishes to discuss a matter of mutual benefit. Mutual benefit? Charlotte's eyes widened. Amelia, surely he cannot mean. I have no idea what he means, Amelia interrupted, though something in her chest fluttered with dangerous hope. It could be anything. Perhaps he requires assistance with some charitable endeavor and remembered our conversation. Or perhaps, Charlotte said slowly, he means to make you an offer. The following afternoon found Amelia dressed in her best remaining gown, a creation of deep emerald silk that had somehow escaped the auction block. Charlotte had insisted on arranging her hair, weaving the copper-toned strands into an elegant arrangement that softened the severity of her features. You look beautiful, Charlotte assured her as the Duke's carriage, sent to collect her, arrived precisely at 2:30. Whatever he proposes, remember your own worth, Amelia. You are the daughter of a viscount, and that means something regardless of your financial circumstances. The Duke's London residence on Grosvenor Square was a testament to centuries of wealth and power. Amelia was shown through marble halls lined with priceless paintings into a private drawing room where Nicholas Davenport awaited her. He stood as she entered, his formal afternoon attire emphasizing his commanding presence. "Lady Amelia, thank you for accepting my invitation." "Your Grace," she curtsied, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he must hear it. "I confess myself curious about this matter of mutual benefit you mentioned. Please sit." He gestured to a chair near the fire, waiting until she was settled before taking the seat across from her. For a moment he simply studied her with those penetrating gray eyes, as though weighing something carefully in his mind. "I will be direct, Lady Amelia, as I believe you value honesty above pretty falsehoods. I am in need of a wife." Whatever Amelia had expected, it was not this. She stared at him, speechless. "I am 36 years old," Nicholas continued, his tone businesslike. "I have spent the past 15 years avoiding matrimony because I have found the entire enterprise tiresome. Young women with calculated smiles and empty heads, mothers with ambitious plans and no scruples. I am tired of being hunted as though I were a prize stag and they the eager hounds." "I see," Amelia managed, though in truth she saw nothing clearly through the fog of shock. "You, however, are different. At the ball, you spoke to me without artifice. You asked nothing of me, expected nothing. You are mature enough to understand the practical nature of aristocratic marriage without entertaining foolish romantic notions. And," he paused, something almost warm entering his expression, "I found your company genuinely pleasant, which is more than I can say for any other woman of my acquaintance." "You wish to marry me?" Amelia said slowly, testing the words. "For practical reasons. I require an heir. You require financial security. It seems a fair exchange." He leaned forward slightly. "I am aware of your circumstances, Lady Amelia. The debts, the creditors, the timeline you face. I can resolve all of that with a single signature." The offer hung between them, tempting and terrible in equal measure. Amelia's mind raced. Marriage to a duke would save not only herself, but preserve what little remained of her father's honor. She would never want for anything material again. And yet, to enter such a union with no illusion of affection, to be forever bound to a man who saw her merely as the most tolerable option. "What would you expect of me?" she asked quietly. "To manage my households with competence, to appear at my side when social obligations demand it, to provide an heir if fortune allows." His expression remained neutral. "What I would not expect is theatrical displays of emotion, constant demands on my time or attention, or interference in my business affairs. And if I refuse, then I shall wish you well and trouble you no further." He paused. "Though I suspect your alternatives are limited." It was the truth, baldly stated without cruelty but without mercy either. Amelia closed her eyes briefly, weighing survival against dignity, and finding them not so different after all. "I accept your offer, Your Grace." Something flickered across Nicholas's face, relief perhaps, or satisfaction. "Then we have an understanding. I shall have my solicitor call upon you tomorrow to arrange the settlement and address your immediate financial concerns. We will announce the engagement at Lady Thornbury's ball next week." As Amelia left Ravenswood House an hour later, her future suddenly secure and terrifyingly uncertain, she wondered if she had just made the wisest decision of her life or signed away any chance at happiness she might have possessed. The announcement of their engagement sent shockwaves through London society, just as Nicholas had predicted. The weeks preceding the wedding passed in a blur of preparations and public scrutiny. Amelia found herself thrust into a world she had observed from the margins for so long, now occupying its very center. The transformation was both exhilarating and exhausting. 3 days after the engagement announcement, Amelia attended a musicale at Lady Thornbury's residence. Charlotte accompanied her, a steadying presence amid the whispered speculation that followed Amelia's every movement. They had barely settled into their seats when a vision in sapphire silk approached, her blonde hair arranged in artful ringlets. "Lady Amelia," the woman purred, her smile not quite reaching her ice-blue eyes. "How delightful to finally make your acquaintance. I am Lady Juliana Westfield." Amelia recognized the name immediately. Society had once whispered that an understanding nearly existed between Lady Juliana and the Duke. Nothing written, nothing sworn, only that dangerous shimmer of expectation that turns gossip into almost truth. If there had been anything real, it had evaporated before the season turned. The beautiful widow whose pursuit of Nicholas had been the subject of much gossip the previous season. She rose, offering a polite curtsy. Lady Westfield, a pleasure. The pleasure is entirely mine, Juliana replied, settling uninvited into the empty seat beside Amelia. I simply had to congratulate you on capturing the Duke's attention. So unexpected, given his usual preferences. Charlotte stiffened beside Amelia, but Amelia maintained her composure. The Duke and I found ourselves well suited to one another. How pragmatic. Juliana's smile widened, revealing perfect teeth. Though I suppose pragmatism is precisely what His Grace requires. A practical arrangement with a practical woman. How very sensible. She leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Between us, my dear, you should know that Nicholas has always valued convenience above sentiment. I do hope you harbor no romantic illusions about this match. Before Amelia could respond, the music began, sparing her the necessity of reply. But Juliana's words lingered throughout the performance, planting seeds of doubt that Amelia struggled to ignore. The following week, Nicholas collected Amelia for a tour of his principal estates. Charlotte accompanied them as chaperone, her presence a buffer against impropriety and an anchor of normalcy for Amelia. Ravenswood Park encompasses nearly 5,000 acres, Nicholas explained as their carriage approached a magnificent Palladian mansion set amid rolling parkland. The house itself dates to the previous century, though my grandfather modernized the interior considerably. Amelia gazed at the imposing structure with mixed emotions. This would be her home, her responsibility, her prison, or her sanctuary, depending on how their marriage unfolded. Upon arrival, the household staff assembled in the great hall to greet their future duchess. Amelia moved down the line slowly, speaking to each servant personally, asking names and duties with genuine interest. She paused particularly long when introduced to Mrs. Davies, the elderly housekeeper who had served the family for 40 years. You must tell me everything about managing such a grand household, Amelia said warmly. I confess I am accustomed to far more modest establishments. Your guidance will be invaluable. Mrs. Davies's weathered face softened with approval. You're most kind, my lady. It would be my honor to assist you in any way. Nicholas observed these interactions with an expression Amelia could not quite decipher. Later, as they walked through the portrait gallery, he finally spoke. You have a natural ease with the staff. Many ladies of rank consider such civility beneath them. They are people deserving of respect, Amelia replied simply. Their labor maintains the comfort we enjoy. The least I can offer is courtesy. My mother felt similarly, Nicholas said quietly, stopping before a portrait of a dark-haired woman with kind eyes. She believed that nobility of birth meant nothing without nobility of character. It was the first truly personal thing he had shared, and Amelia treasured it. She sounds remarkable. She died when I was 8. His voice remained steady, but something in his posture suggested old wounds. My father was not a demonstrative man. He believed emotions were weaknesses to be conquered. Charlotte, who had been admiring a landscape at the far end of the gallery, tactfully moved even further away, granting them a moment of privacy. I am sorry, Amelia said softly. To lose a parent's warmth so young must have been difficult. Nicholas turned from the portrait, his expression shuddered once more. It taught me self-sufficiency. A valuable lesson. He offered his arm. Come, you should see the gardens. My mother designed them herself. The gardens proved to be a masterpiece of English landscaping, with rose arbors and reflecting pools that caught the afternoon light. As they walked, Nicholas pointed out his mother's favorite spots, each revelation a small gift of trust that Amelia received gratefully. The wedding itself took place on a crisp morning in early June at St. George's Church in Hanover Square. Amelia wore a gown of ivory silk, simple but elegant, with seed pearls embroidered along the bodice. Charlotte stood as her attendant, while Nicholas's friend, Lord Edmund Hartley, served as his groomsman. The ceremony passed in a dreamlike haze. Amelia heard herself making vows, felt the weight of the wedding band as Nicholas slid it onto her finger, and accepted the chaste kiss that sealed their union. When they emerged from the church as husband and wife, society had gathered in force to witness the improbable match between the forgotten spinster and England's most eligible duke. The wedding breakfast at Ravenswood House was a more intimate affair, limited to close family and friends. Sophie attended with Lord Pemberton, her congratulations stilted and her manner still oddly nervous. She departed early, pleading a headache that might have been genuine given her pale complexion. As evening descended and the last guests departed, Amelia found herself alone in the Duchess's chambers, her new title feeling as ill-fitting as borrowed clothing. Her lady's maid, carefully selected by Mrs. Davies, helped her into a nightgown of fine lawn trimmed with lace, then discreetly withdrew. Amelia stood before the mirror, studying her reflection. A duchess stared back, but beneath the title remained the same woman who had stood forgotten in ballroom corners mere weeks ago. She wondered if Nicholas would come to her tonight, if their pragmatic arrangement included the immediate duty of producing an heir. A soft knock at the connecting door between their chambers answered her question. "May I enter?" Nicholas's voice came through the heavy oak. "Yes." Amelia's heart hammered as she turned to face him. He entered wearing a dressing gown of dark blue silk, his hair slightly disheveled from removing the formal styling of the ceremony. For a moment they simply regarded one another across the expanse of the elegant room. "I wish to speak with you," Nicholas began, his usual confidence seeming somewhat diminished, "about our expectations for this marriage." "Of course." Amelia gestured to the chairs arranged before the fireplace, and they sat, the flames casting shifting shadows across their faces. "We entered this union for practical reasons," Nicholas said carefully. "I believe we should allow it to develop naturally rather than forcing intimacy that neither of us feels." Relief and disappointment warred within Amelia's chest. "You wish to maintain separate chambers?" "For now, yes, until such time as we have established genuine regard for one another." He met her eyes directly. "I know this is unconventional, but I have no desire to make demands upon you that would render our situation uncomfortable." Amelia considered his words, recognizing both the courtesy and the distance they represented. "I appreciate your consideration, Your Grace." "Nicholas," he corrected gently. "We are married now. Surely you can use my given name." "Nicholas," she repeated, the name feeling intimate on her tongue. "And you should call me Amelia." He smiled then, a genuine expression that softened his austere features. "Amelia, it suits you." They spoke a while longer, discussing practicalities and plans for the coming weeks. When Nicholas finally rose to return to his own chambers, he paused at the connecting door. "This arrangement," he said, "it need not be permanent. When we are ready, if we are ready, we shall reassess." After he departed, Amelia climbed into the massive four-poster bed alone, acutely aware of the empty space beside her. Their marriage had been consummated in name only, sealed with vows but not with the physical union that would make it irrevocable in the eyes of the church and society. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt the weight of an uncertain future stretching before her, neither wife nor stranger, but something suspended between the two. Outside her window, the nightingales sang in the gardens his mother had planted, and Amelia wondered if genuine regard could ever truly develop between two people who had chosen convenience over passion. Tomorrow they would begin their life together as Duke and Duchess, performing their roles for a watching world. But tonight, in the darkness of her chambers, Amelia allowed herself to acknowledge the truth she had been avoiding since accepting Nicholas's proposal. She had married a man who might never truly see her as anything more than a practical solution to an aristocratic problem. The first months of marriage settled into a pattern both comfortable and confining. Nicholas departed for London 3 days after their wedding, urgent parliamentary matters requiring his attention. His absence lasted nearly a fortnight, leaving Amelia to navigate her new position as Duchess of Ravenswood largely alone. She threw herself into understanding the vast household with determined focus. Each morning, she met with Mrs. Davies in the housekeeper's sitting room, a cozy space that smelled of lavender and beeswax, learning the intricate rhythms that governed Ravenswood Park. "The linen inventory should be conducted monthly, Your Grace," Mrs. Davies explained, her weathered hands moving across ledgers with practiced ease. "And the silver needs polishing weekly, though young Thomas tends to forget the serving platters. Then perhaps we might create a written schedule," Amelia suggested gently. "Something Thomas can refer to so nothing is overlooked." The housekeeper's eyes brightened with approval. "A sensible solution, Your Grace." The previous Duchess, God rest her soul, maintained such systems herself before illness prevented her. Amelia discovered that Nicholas's mother had been beloved by the staff, her kindness still remembered decades after her death. Walking in such footsteps felt daunting, yet the servant's willingness to share stories of the late Duchess gave Amelia unexpected comfort. She learned which tenant families needed assistance, which village matters required ducal attention, and which local customs should be honored. By the third week, Amelia had established a routine of visiting the estate's tenant farmers. Accompanied by Mr. Fletcher, the land steward, she listened to concerns about drainage issues and crop rotation, taking careful notes and promising to discuss matters with the Duke upon his return. "Your Grace shows genuine interest," Mr. Fletcher remarked as they rode back toward the great house one afternoon. "It's refreshing. Many ladies of rank consider such matters beneath their notice. How can I be mistress of Ravenswood if I don't understand what makes it thrive?" Amelia replied, her gaze sweeping across the rolling fields. The land held a beauty she had not expected, something peaceful in its ordered cultivation and ancient hedgerows. Charlotte arrived for an extended visit in the fourth week, her presence a welcome reminder of Amelia's life before the title. They took tea in the morning room, sunlight streaming through tall windows that overlooked the rose gardens. "You look well?" Charlotte observed, studying her friend over the rim of her teacup. "Content even, though I notice His Grace remains absent." "Parliamentary session," Amelia explained, tracing the pattern on her saucer. "He sends regular correspondence regarding estate matters. His letters are quite detailed, but not personal. We agreed this would be a practical arrangement, Charlotte. I can hardly complain that he honors our understanding." Charlotte set down her cup with deliberate care. "Amelia, you're falling in love with him." The words hung in the air between them. Amelia felt heat rising in her cheeks, a betraying flush she could not prevent. "Don't be absurd. You speak of his letters with such careful neutrality that it reveals everything. You've reorganized this entire household in ways you think might please him. You wear your hair differently now, and I noticed you chose the green riding habit today, the one that brings out your eyes." Charlotte's expression softened with sympathy. "Oh, my dear friend, does he know?" "There is nothing to know," Amelia insisted, though the protest rang hollow even to her own ears. "I am simply being a good wife, managing his household as expected." "You're being more than that. You're building a home for him, hoping he'll notice, hoping he'll care." The truth of Charlotte's words struck deep. Over the past weeks, Amelia had caught herself choosing activities and decisions based not merely on practical considerations, but on what might earn Nicholas's approval. She had imagined his reactions to improvements she implemented, rehearsed how she would describe her efforts when he returned. Without intending it, without even fully acknowledging it, she had begun to crave something more than the cordial distance they had agreed upon. "It doesn't matter what I feel," Amelia said quietly. Nicholas was honest about his expectations. "I cannot fault him for maintaining the boundaries he established. But you can hope those boundaries might shift. Hope is a luxury I cannot afford." Before Charlotte could respond, a commotion in the entrance hall drew their attention. Voices echoed through the house, followed by footsteps on marble floors. Moments later, Mrs. Davies appeared at the door, her face flushed with excitement. "Your Grace, His Grace has returned from London." Amelia's heart leaped traitorously. She rose, smoothing her gown with suddenly nervous hands. "Thank you, Mrs. Davies. Please inform him I shall receive him in the drawing room." Nicholas entered looking travel-worn but handsome, dust from the road still clinging to his boots. His gray eyes swept the room, taking in Charlotte's presence before settling on Amelia with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Lady Amelia, Miss Hayes, forgive my appearance. The journey was longer than anticipated." "You're welcome in your own home regardless of appearances," Amelia replied, gesturing to a chair. "May I offer refreshment? You must be weary." "Tea would be appreciated." He settled into the offered seat, his posture suggesting fatigue. "I trust all has been well in my absence." Charlotte excused herself with obvious discretion, leaving them alone. Amelia poured tea with steady hands, acutely aware of Nicholas's gaze following her movements. "Everything has proceeded smoothly," she reported. "Mr. Fletcher and I conducted inspections of the tenant holdings. There are some drainage concerns in the eastern fields that require attention, and the widow Morrison needs repairs to her cottage roof before winter. I've prepared detailed notes for your review." Something shifted in Nicholas's expression, surprise perhaps, or approval. You've been conducting estate business? Was I not supposed to? Amelia handed him his cup, their fingers brushing briefly. You mentioned you would be occupied with parliamentary matters. I thought assisting Mr. Fletcher might prove useful. Most duchesses concern themselves solely with social obligations and household decoration. I am not most duchesses. The words emerged with more spirit than she intended. Forgive me. I did not mean to overstep. You haven't. Nicholas studied her with renewed interest, as though seeing something unexpected. Your initiative is admirable. I am grateful for your attention to these matters. The praise warmed her more than it should have. They spent the next hour discussing estate business, Nicholas asking thoughtful questions about her observations and seeming genuinely impressed by her thoroughness. By the time he excused himself to bathe and change, Amelia felt cautiously hopeful that their relationship might deepen beyond mere convenience. That hope proved premature when, 3 days later, a dinner party arranged weeks earlier brought unexpected complications. Lord and Lady Worthington had invited a dozen guests to dine at their estate near Ravenswood, including the Duke and Duchess as guests of honor. Amelia dressed carefully in a gown of deep blue silk, Charlotte helping arrange her hair in an elegant style that Nicholas had once complimented. They arrived to find the other guests already assembled, including several faces Amelia recognized from London society. Your Grace, how delightful, Lady Worthington gushed, leading them toward the drawing room. We are honored by your presence. You remember Lady Juliana Westfield, of course. She's staying with us for the season. Amelia's stomach sank as she saw Juliana rising from a settee, resplendent in crimson silk that emphasized her golden beauty. The widow's smile was perfectly calibrated, warm enough to seem friendly, yet cold enough to convey possession. Nicholas, Juliana purred, extending her hand. What a lovely surprise. I had no idea you would be in residence at Ravenswood. Lady Westfield. Nicholas bowed over her hand with formal courtesy. May I present my wife, the Duchess of Ravenswood? We've met. Juliana's gaze swept over Amelia dismissively. Though I confess, Your Grace, you look quite transformed from the wallflower I remember from London balls. Marriage clearly agrees with you. The insult was delivered with such sweetness that objecting would seem churlish. Amelia simply inclined her head. Thank you for your kind observation, Lady Westfield. Throughout dinner, Juliana positioned herself to dominate Nicholas's attention, regaling the table with witty stories from parliamentary circles and mutual acquaintances. Nicholas responded with polite interest, seemingly unaware of how Juliana's performance systematically excluded Amelia from their conversation. I understand you've been quite busy playing Lady of the Manor, Juliana remarked during the second course, her tone suggesting charitable work among the poor. How quaint. Nicholas, do you remember when your mother attempted similar endeavors? Your father found it terribly amusing, a duchess concerning herself with tenant drainage. Nicholas frowned slightly. My father was wrong. My mother's work was valuable. Oh, certainly, Juliana agreed quickly, though one does wonder if such efforts are truly appropriate for someone of ducal rank. There are stewards for such matters, after all. Amelia felt each barb land, her composure wavering. Across the table, Charlotte watched with growing anger, but intervening would only make matters worse. Nicholas remained focused on his plate, apparently oblivious to the subtle warfare being waged. By evening's end, Amelia's head throbbed and her spirits had plummeted. In the carriage returning to Ravenswood, Nicholas seemed distracted, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. Juliana mentioned several parliamentary matters of interest, he remarked. I should follow up on those connections. Amelia stared out the window at the dark countryside, realizing with painful clarity that while she had been falling in love with her husband, he remained entirely focused on his duties, unaware of her feelings and blind to threats that seemed obvious to everyone else. The morning after the Worthington dinner, Nicholas departed for London again, leaving Amelia to wrestle with emotions she could no longer deny. Juliana's pointed remarks had accomplished their purpose, planting doubts that took root in the fertile soil of Amelia's insecurities. She knows exactly what she's doing, Charlotte observed 3 days later as they walked through Ravenswood's rose gardens. Every word calculated to wound. Perhaps she's right, Amelia replied quietly. Perhaps I am playing at being a duchess, pretending I belong in a world where I'll always be the forgotten spinster who happened to catch a duke's charitable attention. Charlotte stopped walking, gripping Amelia's arm firmly. That is Juliana's poison speaking, not truth. You've transformed this household, earned the respect of every servant and tenant. You are far more than Nicholas bargained for when he made his practical proposal. Before Amelia could respond, young Thomas, the footman who tended the silver, came running across the lawn, his face flushed with exertion. Your Grace, begging your pardon, but Mr. Whitmore says you should come immediately. There's been a discovery. Mr. Whitmore, the head footman, awaited them in Nicholas's private study, his expression grave. In his hands he held a sealed letter, the paper expensive, the handwriting feminine. Your Grace, I discovered this among the post that arrived yesterday. It was addressed to His Grace, but the seal had been tampered with and resealed. He hesitated. I would not normally presume, but given the circumstances, I thought you should see it first. Amelia took the letter with trembling fingers, recognizing the elaborate script even before she read the signature. Lady Juliana Westfield had written to Nicholas, and someone had ensured Amelia would see it. Should I fetch smelling salts, Your Grace? Mr. Whitmore asked with concern. No, thank you. Please leave us. Amelia waited until he departed before breaking the seal and reading the contents aloud to Charlotte. My dearest Nicholas, how delightful it was to see you at the Worthingtons. I have missed our conversations these past months. London grows tedious without your company, and I find myself longing for the connection we once shared. Your wife seems a sensible creature, well suited to managing your household. I trust she understands the nature of aristocratic marriages and will not object to our continued friendship. I shall be in residence at Worthington Manor through month's end. Do call upon me. We have much to discuss. Ever yours, Juliana. Charlotte snatched the letter from Amelia's hands, rereading it with mounting fury. The audacity. Connection we once shared. Ever yours. She might as well have announced they were lovers. Perhaps they were, Amelia whispered, sinking into a chair. He was engaged to her once, Charlotte. Who am I to presume his feelings? You are his wife, and this, Charlotte waved the letter furiously, is manipulation. Can you not see? She wants you to doubt him, to create discord between you. But doubt had already taken root. When Nicholas returned from London 2 days later, Amelia met him in the entrance hall with the letter in hand, her composure barely maintained. We need to speak privately, she said, without preamble, ignoring his surprised expression. In his study, she thrust the letter toward him. This arrived for you. The seal had been tampered with, so I read it. Nicholas scanned the contents, his face darkening with each line. This is unconscionable. Is it true? Amelia heard her voice shake despite her efforts. Did you share a connection with her? Are you maintaining her as your mistress? What? Nicholas stared at her, genuine shock registering on his features. You believe I would be so dishonorable? I don't know what to believe. The words burst from Amelia, months of uncertainty and suppressed feelings flooding forth. You leave for weeks at a time. You barely speak to me beyond estate matters. You maintain separate chambers as though I carry some contagion. And now this woman, this beautiful, sophisticated widow who clearly wants you, writes as though you belong to her. What am I supposed to think? You are supposed to think better of me than that. Nicholas replied, his voice cold with offense. I have never touched Juliana Westfield, not in the manner this letter implies. She pursued me relentlessly last season. When I made clear I had no interest, she persisted. I was relieved when she finally withdrew her attention, or so I thought. Then why does she write to you in such intimate terms? Because she's attempting to manipulate you. Nicholas crossed to stand before Amelia, his gray eyes blazing. Can you not see? She wants you to doubt me, to create exactly this scene. And it appears she's succeeded. Perhaps if you had been honest with me about your history with her, I wouldn't be so easily manipulated. Amelia shot back. You told me you required a practical wife, someone who would ask nothing of you. Well, I have honored that agreement. I've asked nothing, expected nothing, demanded nothing. But I will not be made a fool of in my own home. Silence fell between them, thick with accusation and wounded pride. Then Nicholas did something unexpected. He sank into the chair behind his desk, his anger deflating into something that looked remarkably like despair. You're right, he said quietly. I should have told you about Juliana. I should have warned you she might cause trouble. He looked up at Amelia, and for the first time since their marriage, she saw genuine vulnerability in his expression. The truth is, I didn't think it would matter. I didn't think you would care enough about my associations to be hurt by them. Well, I do care, Amelia whispered, the admission costing her dearly. God help me, Nicholas, but I care very much. Something shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to wonder. You care about me? How could I not? Amelia turned away, unable to bear his scrutiny. I live in your home, manage your household, know your tenants by name. I sleep in chambers adjoining yours, separated by a door that never opens. Do you think I'm made of stone? She heard him rise, felt his presence behind her. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I thought I was protecting you. From myself. From expectations I didn't know how to meet. My father was cold, distant. The only warmth I knew as a child came from my mother, and she died when I was 8. After that, there was only duty, responsibility, the weight of a title I never asked for. I learned to bury everything I felt, to function without the vulnerability of genuine connection. It's all I know. Amelia turned to face him, seeing past the Duke to the wounded boy he had been. That must have been terribly lonely. It was, Nicholas admitted. It still is. But then you walked into my life with your honest eyes and sharp tongue, and for the first time I wondered if perhaps loneliness wasn't inevitable. Perhaps connection was possible, if I was brave enough to reach for it. He took her hands in his, the touch sending warmth through her entire body. I'm not brave, Amelia. Not about this. But I'm trying. These past months watching you transform Ravenswood, seeing you win over staff and tenants who barely tolerated my father's coldness, I've been falling for you. Slowly, terrifyingly, completely. Nicholas, she breathed, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. I should have told you sooner. I should have been honest about my feelings instead of maintaining this distance I thought would protect us both. But I was afraid. Afraid you married me only for security and would find my emotions burdensome. Afraid that if I gave you my heart, you might not want it. Amelia reached up to touch his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. You foolish man. Don't you know I've been in love with you since our 3rd week of marriage? Why do you think I've worked so hard to make Ravenswood a home? I was trying to show you what I couldn't say. Nicholas pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. We're quite a pair, aren't we? 2 broken people trying to build something whole. Perhaps that's exactly what we need to be, Amelia whispered. Broken together, healing together. When he kissed her, it was nothing like the chaste brush of lips at their wedding. This kiss was deep, searching, filled with months of suppressed longing and newly acknowledged love. Amelia melted into his embrace, her hands fisting in his coat as he pulled her tightly against him. I love you, Nicholas murmured against her lips. I should have said it weeks ago, but I'm saying it now. I love you, Amelia Davenport, Duchess of Ravenswood, my practical, brilliant, beautiful wife. I love you too, she replied, tears streaming down her cheeks, even when you're being impossibly distant and obtuse. He laughed, the sound free and genuine. I promise to work on that. They stood in his study, wrapped in each other's arms, while outside the window the sun set over Ravenswood's gardens. The distance that had separated them for months had finally been breached, and in its place grew something far more powerful than either had imagined possible. Later that evening, Nicholas sat at his desk composing a response to Juliana's letter while Amelia watched from the settee. Tell her our marriage is everything you hoped it would be, Amelia suggested. That should sufficiently discourage her ambitions. Nicholas smiled, adding another line to his correspondence. I believe I'll do better than that. I'll tell her the truth, that I've found what I didn't even know I was searching for, and no amount of manipulation can touch it. The weeks following their confession transformed their marriage entirely. Nicholas no longer retreated to his study each evening, but sought Amelia's company, their conversations ranging from estate matters to philosophy to shared laughter over the most trivial observations. The connecting door between their chambers now stood open, an invitation that Amelia accepted with joy and Nicholas with reverent tenderness. Yet their newfound happiness existed in a precarious balance. Rumors had begun circulating through London society, whispers that reached Ravenswood through visiting neighbors and correspondence from Charlotte's connections. Lady Juliana Westfield, it seemed, had not accepted defeat gracefully. She's telling anyone who will listen that your marriage is a sham, Charlotte reported during breakfast one morning, her expression troubled. That Nicholas married you out of pity and maintains mistresses in London. Nicholas set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. The woman is relentless in her malice. We could ignore it, Amelia suggested, though uncertainty colored her voice. Surely people of sense will see through her lies. People of sense are unfortunately rare in London society, Charlotte replied dryly. Most prefer salacious gossip to truth. Before Nicholas could respond, Mrs. Davies appeared at the dining room door. Your Grace, Lady Pemberton has arrived and requests an immediate audience. She appears most distressed. Amelia exchanged glances with Nicholas. Show her to the morning room. I shall come directly. Sophie stood at the window when Amelia entered, her blonde hair disheveled, her traveling dress rumpled from what appeared to be hasty departure. When she turned, her face was pale and tear-streaked, her usual composed beauty ravaged by evident distress. Amelia, she whispered, then rushed forward to grip her sister's hands. Oh God, Amelia, I've been such a fool. Sophie, what's happened? Is Lord Pemberton well? Well, Sophie laughed bitterly. He's ruined us completely. The investments he promised would make our fortune have failed entirely. We're bankrupt, worse than father ever was. The creditors are demanding payment, threatening prison if we don't settle within the fortnight. Amelia led her sister to the settee, calling for tea before turning back to Sophie's distraught face. Why come to me now? When I was facing ruin months ago, you refused all help. Fresh tears spilled down Sophie's cheeks. Because I was threatened. Lady Westfield discovered our financial difficulties last year. She offered to introduce Pemberton to investors, promised to help us recover. But the price was my cooperation in discrediting you. What? Amelia felt as though the floor had shifted beneath her. She wanted the Duke, Sophie continued miserably. She's been obsessed with him for years. When he announced his engagement to you, she was furious. She came to me with evidence of Pemberton's gambling debts and threatened to expose us to society unless I helped her drive a wedge between you and Nicholas. That's why you were so cold at the wedding, Amelia murmured, pieces falling into place. Why you seemed frightened. I was terrified and ashamed, but I told myself it didn't matter, that your marriage was merely practical anyway. So what harm could a few cold shoulders do? Sophie gripped Amelia's hands tighter. I didn't know you would fall in love with him. I didn't realize Juliana's plans went beyond simple sabotage. Nicholas entered the morning room, having been summoned by Mrs. Davies. His expression darkened as he listened to Sophie's confession, the full scope of Juliana's machinations becoming clear. What else did she ask you to do? He demanded. Sophie flinched at his tone but answered honestly. She wanted me to spread rumors about Amelia's unsuitability as a duchess, to suggest the marriage was loveless and would produce no heirs, to plant doubts wherever possible. And I did it all because I was weak and frightened and selfish. You betrayed your own sister, Nicholas said coldly. I know, Sophie's voice broke. I know what I am, but I came here today to warn you both. Juliana isn't finished. She's planning something for Lady Thornberry's masquerade. Certain persons have forged letters and bartered fear, Nicholas said, the room holding its breath. Let it be known, they will find no purchase here. He lifted his mask. This is my wife, my Duchess, whose courage has steadied my house and whose kindness has undone me. Ball next week. I don't know what exactly, but she mentioned having evidence that would humiliate you both publicly. Amelia felt Nicholas's hand settle protectively on her shoulder. Evidence of what? I don't know. She wouldn't tell me details, but she was triumphant about it. Certain it would destroy your reputation and force Amelia into obscurity. The room fell silent as they processed this information. Finally, Nicholas spoke, his voice calm but laced with steel. Thank you for the warning, Sophie. Despite your previous actions, coming here today took courage. I don't deserve your gratitude, Sophie whispered. I deserve your contempt. What you deserve and what I choose to give are different matters, Nicholas replied. Amelia, what would you have me do? Amelia studied her sister's tear-stained face, seeing for the first time the fear and desperation that had driven Sophie's choices. It didn't excuse the betrayal, but it explained it. Help her, she said finally. Clear the debts, but ensure Lord Pemberton understands this is the only assistance he'll receive. And Sophie will make amends by providing every detail she knows about Juliana's plans. Over the following days, Nicholas conducted a thorough investigation with the help of his solicitor and several trusted connections. What they discovered was damning. Juliana had been systematically manipulating several families, using their financial vulnerabilities to further her various schemes. More significantly, the so-called evidence she planned to present was entirely fabricated. Forged letters suggesting Nicholas maintained a mistress in London. "She's grown desperate," Nicholas observed, reviewing the findings in his study. "Her reputation has suffered from her obvious pursuit of me. This is her final gambit to either win me or destroy us both." "Then we must act first," Amelia said firmly, "at the masquerade ball before she can present her false evidence." Lady Thornbury's masquerade ball was the social event of the season, attended by everyone of consequence in London society. Amelia arrived on Nicholas's arm, her emerald gown complementing his formal attire, both wearing elegant masks that barely concealed their identities. Charlotte positioned herself strategically near the refreshment table, watching for Juliana's arrival. When the widow finally appeared, resplendent in gold silk and a jeweled mask, Charlotte signaled to Nicholas. The orchestra finished their current piece, and into the brief silence, Nicholas stepped forward onto the raised platform where musicians typically performed. Every eye in the ballroom turned toward him. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting the festivities, but I have an announcement of some importance." Juliana, recognizing his voice immediately, began moving toward the doors, but Nicholas's footmen had already positioned themselves there on his prior instruction. "It has come to my attention," Nicholas continued, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room, "that certain individuals have been spreading malicious falsehoods about my wife, the Duchess of Ravenswood. Tonight I wish to address these rumors directly." He gestured, and his solicitor stepped forward bearing a folder of documents. "Lady Juliana Westfield has attempted to blackmail several families into assisting her campaign against my Duchess. She has forged correspondence suggesting infidelity on my part. She has manipulated good people through fear and intimidation, all because I refused her advances last season." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Juliana stood frozen, her face visible even behind her mask, pale and stricken. "I have evidence of every claim," Nicholas stated coldly. "Evidence that will be made available to anyone who wishes to examine it. But more importantly, I wish to make one thing absolutely clear to everyone present." He descended from the platform and crossed directly to where Amelia stood, taking both her hands in his. Though they still wore their masks, his voice resonated with unmistakable passion. "Lady Amelia Fairmont came into my life when I had resigned myself to an existence devoid of genuine connection. She transformed my household, won the devotion of my staff and tenants, and showed me what it means to build something real rather than merely maintaining appearances. She is brilliant, compassionate, brave, and I am honored beyond measure that she chose to be my Duchess." He turned to address the assembly once more. "Any further attempts to malign her character will be met with the full weight of my legal and social influence. The Duchess of Ravenswood has my complete devotion, my absolute loyalty, and my eternal love. I suggest anyone who doubts that prepares to face consequences they will not enjoy." The ballroom erupted into whispers and exclamations. Juliana fled through a side door, her humiliation complete. Nicholas removed his mask, then gently lifted Amelia's, kissing her before the entire assembly with such tenderness that several ladies sighed audibly. Charlotte appeared at Amelia's side moments later, her eyes bright with triumph. "Well done, both of you. That was masterful." As the evening progressed and guests gradually accepted the truth they'd witnessed, Sophie approached hesitantly. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for giving me the chance to make amends. I'll spend the rest of my life proving worthy of your forgiveness." Amelia embraced her sister, feeling the weight of months of pain and betrayal begin to lift. "We're family, Sophie. That means something." Later, as their carriage carried them back to their London residence, Nicholas pulled Amelia close. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "Only that it took us so long to reach this understanding," Amelia replied, resting her head against his shoulder. but perhaps we needed the journey to appreciate the destination. Then every moment was worth it, Nicholas murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. My clever, courageous Duchess. The morning after the masquerade, a ripple moved through the room, half shock, half delight, for a masquerade always loosened the hems of propriety, and what might have been scandal on an ordinary night became, under silk and music, a story to be told with shining eyes. Ball London society awoke to find its perceptions fundamentally altered. What had once been whispered as scandalous curiosity, the forgotten spinster who had somehow captured a duke, had transformed overnight into something approaching legend. The woman who had endured mockery with quiet dignity now commanded respect, and the duke who had seemed coldly untouchable had revealed depths of devotion that set every romantic heart aflutter. "Your Grace, the morning room is overflowing with callers," Mrs. Davies reported at Ravenswood's London residence, her weathered face creased with satisfaction. "Lady Worthington, the Duchess of Pembroke, Lady Margaret Cavendish, all requesting the honor of your company." Amelia stood at the window overlooking the square, watching carriages queue outside their townhouse. How extraordinary. Yesterday, most of those women barely acknowledged my existence. Yesterday, they did not understand who you truly were, Nicholas said from the doorway, crossing to stand behind her. His hands settled on her shoulders, a gesture of possession and protection that had become second nature since their reconciliation. "Now they see what I have known for months. You are exceptional." She leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I find myself uncertain how to navigate this transformation. These same women who pitied me now seek my favor." "Then receive them with the grace you have always shown," Nicholas advised, pressing a kiss to her temple. "But remember that you owe them nothing beyond courtesy. The respect you've earned is not theirs to bestow or withdraw at whim." Over the following weeks, Amelia discovered the peculiar nature of social redemption. Invitations that had been extended out of obligation to the Duke now arrived with genuine enthusiasm. Ladies who had once whispered about her age and unmarketability now praised her maturity and dignity. The transformation might have been laughable had it not been so complete. Charlotte visited often during this period, her pragmatic wisdom helping Amelia navigate her new status. "You must remember," Charlotte observed during tea one afternoon, "that most of these women are simply following the herd. Nicholas's public declaration gave them permission to admire you. They would never have reached that conclusion independently. Does that not make their admiration hollow?" "Perhaps," Charlotte conceded, "but no more hollow than their previous disdain. Society is fickle, my dear. The wise woman accepts its favor without depending upon it. But society's opinion, however gratifying, paled in comparison to the deepening intimacy between Amelia and Nicholas. The distance that had characterized their early marriage had been replaced by a connection that grew stronger with each passing day. They worked together managing the estates, their discussions ranging from practical matters to philosophy to dreams they had never dared voice before. One evening, as they sat together in the library at Ravenswood Park, Nicholas set aside the ledger he had been reviewing and studied Amelia with an intensity that made her breath catch. "What is it?" she asked, marking her place in the novel she'd been reading. "I was thinking how grateful I am that you attended the Worthington ball all those months ago," he replied quietly. "That you stood in that corner where I could not help but notice you. That you were brave enough to speak honestly when I approached you on the terrace. I was hardly brave. I was resigned to invisibility. You were magnificent." Nicholas rose and crossed to her chair, pulling her gently to her feet. "You are magnificent, and I find myself wanting to demonstrate my appreciation in ways that words cannot adequately express." He kissed her then with a passion that had been building for weeks, and when he lifted her in his arms and carried her toward his chambers, Amelia went willingly, her heart full to bursting. That night their marriage was finally consummated with the tenderness and passion of two people who had found genuine love against all expectations. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Amelia's life. Nicholas became more demonstrative in his affection, his touches frequent and affectionate whether in private or before the household staff. The servants, who had initially viewed their marriage as a cold arrangement, now smiled knowingly at the obvious devotion between the Duke and Duchess. It was Mrs. Davies who first noticed the subtle changes. "Your Grace," the housekeeper said carefully during their weekly meeting, I wonder if perhaps you might wish to consult with a physician. You've been pale these past mornings, and I noticed you barely touched your breakfast." Amelia had been attributing her queasiness to rich food, or perhaps lingering stress from the confrontation with Juliana. But Mrs. Davies's meaningful look made her pause and count back through the weeks since that first night of true intimacy. The physician confirmed what Amelia had begun to suspect. She was with child. The news filled her with simultaneous joy and terror. At 34, she was significantly older than most first-time mothers. The risks were considerable, as the physician carefully explained, though not insurmountable. With proper care and rest, many women her age delivered healthy babies. When she told Nicholas that evening in the privacy of their chambers, his reaction mirrored her own conflicted emotions. Joy lit his face for a brilliant moment before being overtaken by fear. "A child," he breathed, his hand moving reverently to rest upon her still flat stomach. "Our child." Then, with sudden intensity, "You must have the finest physicians. Complete rest. Whatever you need. Nicholas, I am not made of glass, but you are precious beyond measure," he insisted, his voice rough with emotion. "The thought of losing you terrifies me more than I can express." His protectiveness only intensified as the weeks progressed. He hovered anxiously, insisted she avoid any activity more strenuous than gentle walks in the garden, and consulted with 3 different physicians to ensure she received the best possible care. Amelia bore his fussing with patience, understanding it as an expression of his love even when it grew excessive. Sophie visited during Amelia's 3rd month, arriving at Ravenswood with visible nervousness. The relationship between the sisters had remained tentative since Sophie's confession, cordial but careful. "I wanted to offer my congratulations," Sophie said as they took tea in the morning room, "and to ask once more for your forgiveness. I know I have apologized repeatedly, but I fear words will never be sufficient for the harm I caused." Amelia studied her sister, seeing genuine remorse in Sophie's expression. "You were frightened and manipulated. I understand that now. But I should have been stronger. You would have been." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "You've always been the strong one, Amelia. Even when Father was dying and we had nothing, you never faltered. When I needed you most, I turned on you to save myself. How can you ever truly forgive that?" "Because you are my sister," Amelia replied simply, "and because holding on to anger serves no purpose except to poison us both. What Juliana did was calculated to exploit your weakness. I will not give her the victory of destroying our family permanently." Sophie reached across to grasp Amelia's hand. "I swear I will spend the rest of my life proving worthy of this second chance. Then help me prepare for this child," Amelia suggested gently. "I confess I am terrified. You have experience with motherhood through your friends. Share your wisdom with me." Over the following months, Sophie became a regular visitor, and slowly, the warmth that had characterized their childhood relationship began to resurface. They worked together on the nursery, selecting fabrics and debating names. Charlotte joined them often, the 3 women forming a support network that eased Amelia's fears. Nicholas remained anxiously attentive throughout the pregnancy, his protectiveness reaching almost comical heights. He personally inspected every piece of furniture in the nursery for safety, consulted with multiple midwives, and barely let Amelia out of his sight during her final months. "You realize I survived 34 years before meeting you," Amelia teased gently during one of his more excessive displays of concern. "But now you carry something infinitely precious," Nicholas replied seriously. "Not merely our child, but my entire heart. I cannot be rational about your safety." His vulnerability touched her deeply. This man who had once seemed so controlled and distant now wore his emotions openly, his love for her evident in every gesture and word. As winter approached and Amelia grew large with child, she often reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From forgotten spinster to beloved duchess, from resigned loneliness to a love that exceeded her wildest imaginings, her life had been transformed in ways she could never have anticipated that night she had attended the Worthington ball. "Do you regret it?" Nicholas asked one evening as they sat before the fire, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "Accepting my practical proposal?" "I regret nothing," Amelia replied honestly. "Even the difficult moments brought us here, to this happiness. How could I regret the path that led me to you?" The final months of Amelia's pregnancy brought winter to Ravenswood Park, snow blanketing the gardens where she had first walked with Nicholas. Her body grew increasingly cumbersome, and with each passing day, Nicholas's protective instincts intensified to heights that bordered on the absurd. "Absolutely not," he declared when Amelia suggested walking to the village to visit the tenant families. "The roads are icy. You could fall." "Nicholas, I am perfectly capable of managing a short walk, with a physician in attendance and 4 footmen clearing the path before you," he countered stubbornly. "I will not risk your safety or our child's for the sake of a social call." Charlotte, who had taken up permanent residence at Ravenswood to assist during the final weeks, exchanged amused glances with Sophie across the breakfast table. "Your Grace, I believe the Duchess is made of sturdier material than porcelain." "That may be," Nicholas replied without humor, "but I am taking no chances." His obsessive vigilance extended to every aspect of Amelia's day. He personally inspected every meal prepared for her, consulted with the midwife twice weekly, and barely let her out of his sight. At night, he lay awake listening to her breathing, terrified that something might go wrong while he slept. "You're exhausting yourself," Amelia told him gently one evening, tracing the dark circles beneath his eyes. "When the baby comes, you'll need your strength." "When the baby comes safely and you are well, then I shall rest," Nicholas replied, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Not before." The labor began on a bitter February morning, earlier than expected, but not dangerously so according to the physicians. 38 weeks to the day by the physicians' careful counting. Nicholas, who had maintained iron control throughout the pregnancy, became nearly incoherent with anxiety as Amelia's pains intensified. "I cannot do this," Amelia gasped during a particularly fierce contraction, gripping Charlotte's hand. "I'm too old. It's too difficult." "You can and you will," Charlotte replied firmly. "You've survived poverty, scandal, and social mockery. You can certainly manage bringing your daughter into the world." "Daughter?" Amelia managed a weak laugh. "How do you know it's a daughter?" "Because only a girl would be this dramatically difficult," Sophie interjected from her position on Amelia's other side. "Trust me on this." The hours stretched endlessly. Outside the bedchamber, Nicholas paced the corridor despite attempts by his steward and solicitor to distract him with business matters. When a particularly sharp cry of pain escaped through the door, he nearly broke through to reach Amelia before being physically restrained. "Your Grace, the midwife knows her work," Mr. Fletcher insisted. "You must trust the process." "That is my wife in there suffering," Nicholas replied hoarsely. "How am I meant to simply stand here?" But stand there he did, because Amelia needed the professionals attending her, not a panicked husband. As dusk fell and candles were lit throughout the house, the cries from the bedchamber changed in quality, becoming more determined, more focused. And then, cutting through the winter evening, came a different sound entirely. The robust wail of a newborn child. The door opened and the midwife emerged, her lined face creased with satisfaction. "Your Grace, you have a daughter. Both mother and child are well." Nicholas did not wait for further invitation. He entered the bedchamber to find Amelia propped against pillows, her face pale with exhaustion but glowing with triumph. In her arms lay a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets, a shock of dark hair visible above a red, squalling face. "Nicholas," Amelia whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Meet your daughter." He crossed to the bed on unsteady legs, sinking down beside them. When he looked at the child, his carefully maintained composure shattered entirely. Tears spilled down his face unchecked as he reached out one trembling finger to touch the impossibly small hand. "She's perfect," he managed through his tears. "You're both perfect. We should name her Caroline," Amelia suggested softly. "After your mother." Nicholas looked up at his wife, this remarkable woman who had transformed his entire existence, and for the first time in his adult life, allowed himself to weep openly. Joy, relief, and overwhelming love poured forth in the tears he had spent decades suppressing. "Caroline," he repeated, lifting the baby carefully into his arms. "Lady Caroline Davenport. Welcome to the world, little one." The months following Caroline's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Nicholas proved himself an unexpectedly devoted father, often found in the nursery at odd hours, simply watching his daughter sleep. Sophie and Charlotte remained frequent visitors, delighting in their roles as aunt and honorary aunt, respectively. When spring arrived and Caroline had grown from a red-faced newborn into a beautiful infant with her father's gray eyes and her mother's copper-touched hair, the Davenports announced a grand celebration. A ball would be held to mark Caroline's christening, introducing their daughter to London society. The preparations consumed Ravenswood for weeks. The ballroom was decorated with thousands of white roses. The champagne was ordered from France despite continued difficulties with trade, and invitations were dispatched to every family of consequence in England. On the evening of the ball, Amelia stood before her mirror in a gown of deep sapphire silk that complemented her figure, now recovered from pregnancy. Charlotte and Sophie had helped arrange her hair in an elaborate style that made her look every inch the Duchess she had become. "You're beautiful," Sophie said softly. "I can hardly believe this is the same woman who stood forgotten in ballroom corners." "Perhaps she never was forgotten," Charlotte observed. "Perhaps she was simply waiting to be truly seen." When Amelia descended the grand staircase on Nicholas's arm, she was greeted by a ballroom filled with guests who had gathered not out of obligation but genuine respect. The same society that had once mocked her now celebrated her transformation, and while Amelia recognized the fickleness of such approval, she could not help but feel gratified. The evening proceeded magnificently. Caroline was presented to the assembly, sleeping peacefully through the attention, and received with appropriate admiration. Toasts were offered celebrating the Davenport family, and when the orchestra began playing, Nicholas turned to his wife with a smile. "May I have this dance, Your Grace?" Amelia placed her hand in his, remembering that first waltz at the Worthington ball when she had been the forgotten spinster and he the untouchable Duke. How far they had traveled since that night. As they moved across the floor, Nicholas pulled her closer than strict propriety allowed. "Do you remember when we first danced?" he murmured. "I told you then that you were the most interesting woman in the room." "I thought you were being kind." "I was being truthful. You fascinated me then, Amelia. You captivate me now." He gazed down at her with such obvious devotion that several ladies nearby sighed audibly. "You have given me everything I didn't know I needed. A real marriage, genuine love, a daughter, a home rather than simply a house. You transformed my entire world." "We transformed each other," Amelia corrected gently. "You taught me that I was worthy of love, that my value did not depend on society's approval." "You saw me when everyone else looked past me." They danced on as their guests watched. The Duke and Duchess of Ravenswood, who had found extraordinary love in the most practical of arrangements. Charlotte stood near the refreshment table, wiping away happy tears. Sophie danced past with Lord Pemberton, their own marriage healing slowly. And in the nursery above, little Caroline slept peacefully, unaware that she had been born into a love story that had begun with two lonely people finding unexpected connection. As the waltz ended and Nicholas kissed Amelia's hand with tender reverence, she looked around the ballroom and marveled at the impossible journey that had brought her here. From forgotten spinster to beloved duchess, from resignation to joy, from loneliness to a love so complete it still took her breath away. The music swelled again, and as Nicholas led her into another dance, Amelia sent a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever forces had brought them together that night at the Worthington ball. When the forgotten spinster had finally been seen, and the untouchable Duke had finally allowed himself to feel. And so, if any truth may be carried from their lives into our own, may you carry this truth into your own lives. It is never too late to be discovered, never too late to find genuine connection, and never too late to build something beautiful from the most unexpected beginnings. Love comes when we least expect it, often in forms we never imagined, and sometimes the most practical arrangements can bloom into the most passionate devotions. May you sleep peacefully tonight, knowing that your own story, whatever its beginning, can still find its happiest ending. For true love recognizes no timeline, respects no limitations, and transforms everything it touches into something precious beyond measure.